Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AF. Our talk, Brian Fisher is my name, talking about our intervention as a Christian nation in these Muslim lands. Everywhere we go, we make things worse for the Christians. I remember, I've said this before many times on this program, but I remember when we made the decision to go into Iraq, which I supported. I believe Saddam and intelligence, I believe these nerve weapons, these chemical weapons that are now in Syria, I believe originally they came from Iraq. Remember, we declared war. We said we're going in while we're getting the troops together. That gave Saddam time to transport these weapons to Syria. That's where they went. We got a former general in the Iraqi Air Force saying, yeah, we sent 56 plane loads of chemical weapons. We took out all the passenger seats. We loaded up the chemical weapons, and we flew them to Syria, 56 plane loads of that stuff. So I think that's where these chemical weapons came from. They came from Saddam. So there were weapons of mass destruction there, just as our intelligence suggested. But I remember saying to my pastor friends the day that was announced, there's only going to be one criteria as to whether this invasion of Iraq is a success or a failure, and that is, do we leave behind a nation where there is genuine religious liberty for Christians? That and that alone will be the measure of whether this was a successful invasion or not. And of course, this turned out to be exactly horribly the opposite. And I'm going to lay that one at the feet of George Bush. George Bush had this fantasy in his mind. And again, this naivete about Islam is staggering to me. President Bush, enormously naive about Islam, called it a religion of peace. And, half of me thinks he actually believed it. And he believed that everybody had a longing and a hunger for freedom, and all you got to do is give them a taste for freedom, and they're going to want more. Completely misunderstanding the darkness and the deception that is the religion of Islam. There is no liberty in Islam. It is a religion of bondage, darkness, totalitarianism, and domination. And President Bush, bless his heart, grew up in a Christian nation where we prize liberty. Why do we prize liberty in the United States? Because we are a Christian nation. Remember what Paul said in 2 Corinthians. This was a verse that was on the lips of the colonists in our conflict with England. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is what? There is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. There is no Spirit of the Lord in Islam. And when people don't understand that, when George Bush doesn't understand that, he just consigned a generation of Christians in Iraq to persecution, death, and flight for their own safety. So, and I got a text from a good friend of mine over the break talking about how Saddam actually leaned on Christians. They were the only ones he could trust. And by the way, that's the reason Assad protected the church, because Assad, and he did it purely for self-protective reasons. He was a dictator. He wanted to be in charge, succeeded his father, wanted to stay in charge. And it was the Brotherhood and the radical Muslims that represented a threat to his dictatorship. Now, he's a Muslim. He's a practicing Muslim, but he's way more interested in power and perks and money than he is advancing the cause of Islam. So he realized that the radical Muslims represented a threat to his hold on power because they wanted him to be as radical in their Islamic faith, as devout in his Islamic faith as they were. So he had to try to keep an eye on them. Same thing happening with Saddam in Iraq. Have to try to repress these Muslims because they were as much of a threat to him as they were to anybody else. Same with Mubarak in Egypt. He kept the Muslim Brotherhood somewhat under control. In fact, he outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood, or somebody before him. The Muslim Brotherhood was actually outlawed in Egypt for a long time because the tyrants, the dictators, wanted to maintain power. They recognized their biggest threat coming from radical Muslims, so I got to keep them under my thumb. And now that's gone, and they provided, because they were holding down the radical Muslims, they at the same time provided some level of protection for the Christians. Mubarak provided some protection for the Coptic Church in Egypt, and Assad provided some protection for the Christians in Syria, and Saddam provided some protection for the Christians in Iraq. Now that protection is completely gone. But my friend pointed out that, you think about Saddam in Iraq, used to be Babylon in biblical days. And remember Daniel, he pointed out that Daniel had the same kind of role for Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, Daniel and other young men like him, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were trustworthy. they were capable, they were intelligent, they were faithful. And even though they were Jews, followed a completely different faith, didn't worship the sun gods or the moon gods that the Babylonians worshiped, they could be trusted with administrative responsibilities. They were elevated to positions of great influence and power in the land. All right, well, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Eddie in South Arkansas. Eddie, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Well, I was just calling, if I don't lose you, to comment. I know there's a lot going on, about this deal, but the thing that puzzles me, the IRS scandal, the gun running scandal, the Obamacare, you don't hear much about that anymore, and they bring up something like this, I think, to get the people's mind off of the other stuff. And then John McCain and Lindsey Graham, they need to be voted out of office. And to me, America needs to wake up and realize what's happening to our country.
Well, and Eddie, there's a serious challenge to Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. He's going to get a challenge in the primary this year because a lot of conservatives in South Carolina have just had it up to here with Lindsey Graham. And John McCain had a serious challenge the last time he ran, and he got a serious challenge from the right. And the way that John McCain fended off that challenge from the right is he pretended to be tough on immigration. He went down to the southern border and says, we got to build the dang fence. I mean, he filmed an ad. We got to build a fence. So he made this big, tough talk about border security, and that's how he was able to fend off the attack. This is 2010, I think it was. Have you heard John McCain say a word about a border fence since he got reelected? None, zip, nada. It was completely empty and meaningless promise. So he's going to get a challenge. And I'll tell you, Eddie, I mean, the reality is with this president, and who knows, I mean, Eddie, the big question to me is what happens if the Congress votes him down? Does he go ahead and go in there anyway? Because John Kerry said he's got the right to do it. He said that yesterday to the Senate. He's got the right to do it. He doesn't need your approval. And that's why Rand Paul was pressing John Kerry, look, this vote's got to mean something. If he's just going to go off and cowboy up, even if we vote him down, then what are we even wasting time having this hearing for? President Obama said, I don't need Congress approval. I can go right ahead and do it. So they think Bush was a cowboy. I mean, Bush laid out the whole deal for Iraq. He laid out the whole deal with Afghanistan. He got authorization from Congress to use military force. He did it just like the Constitution prescribes. And maybe not everybody agreed with it, but he had overwhelming support from both houses of Congress to use force in Afghanistan and again in Iraq. All right, Eddie, listen, I appreciate the call, but the reality is, short of something very unusual, we're going to have this kind of feckless, incompetent leadership in the White House from now until 2016. Number to call, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's go to Lynn in Quad City, Illinois. Don't forget, you can catch us audio and video streaming at afr.net. If you don't have a radio station in your city, go to afr.net, audio and video streaming. We got podcasts. We also have apps for the iPhone, the iPod, and the Android, so you can listen on the go. Let's go to Lynn in Quad City, Illinois. Lynn, welcome. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mr. Fisher.
Howdy.
I just wanted to leave a comment.
Yes, sir.
About the Syrian conflict with President over there and how we're trying to get in, the Muslim Brotherhood and that sort of thing. Something comes to mind. It's not biblical, but it might be applicable. Wouldn't it be better the devil you know than the one you don't?
And you're thinking like in the Syria case. Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, we know that Assad is not a good guy, but the question is, what's the alternative?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Well, I think it's a very, very good point. And, and nobody's really asking that question. I mean, Thomas Sowell, I'm not going to read the whole piece, but I thank you for the call, Lynn. Here's what Thomas Sowell said beginning of his column today. Why are we even talking about taking military action in Syria? What is that military action supposed to accomplish? and what is the probability that it will, in fact, accomplish whatever that unknown goal might be. And nobody's got answers to those questions. So anyway, and then you got John McCain out there saying, hey, I want even more authorization for President Obama to go to war. Let's grab one more call before we go to the end of the hour. Let's go to Gary in Conway, Arkansas. Gary, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to make some comments about Syria. First of all, when we went into Iraq, the country was in a lot better shape financially. So that is one point that we're not thinking about now. Even if we thought it was justified, we don't have the money. Second of all, I don't see that we have any real interest there. Then the third comment I'd like to make is I was watching Fox News last night, and Bill O'Reilly was talking about his idea, and he thought that we should go in and that we had an obligation to do this as being a humane society. Well, and talking about trusting government, well, my last point is I don't trust government. I served 1.5 years in Vietnam. We could have won that war in Vietnam, but there wasn't the political will to do so. We were not willing to do what it took to win it. We were unwilling to bomb Hanoi to its knees. So I just don't think that we have the political will. I don't think we have the interest. And I don't trust our government to do so.
Well, I think you're right, Gary, and that's the problem. And this is a half-baked thing at best. He doesn't want to do regime change, not going to go in there and get the chemical weapons again, politically inept and militarily incompetent. Back in 5.